everybody, welcome to Harmon Garage. I'm Aaron. Today I'm going to go through rebuilding an Edelbrock carburetor and show you guys how I do it and what I do. So we've got a 1406 Edelbrock, got an Edelbrock rebuild kit. I'll go through all the pieces and stuff as we go and show you guys how I do it and how I preset them and stuff like that. So let me get set up and I'll show you what's going on. Okay, so first off, this is a 1406, which is a 600 CFM Edelbrock carburetor. From my experience, all Edelbrock carbs are basically the same. There's not a whole lot of difference to them, so the kit's pretty much the same for all of them, and so on and so forth. So first thing you want to do is get all your arms off. You got your accelerator bracket arm here. It's supposed to have a clip on it, but it's missing, so we'll just go ahead and disconnect that. You have your arm here that I got little clips on them. Go ahead and pop those off. Want to make sure you save it. Sometimes the kits come with new ones, sometimes they don't. So you have those two unhooked, and then there's another one over on this side that controls your choke plates. So go ahead and pull that off. Pop it out. You got to do all that first, because without unhooking those arms you can't remove this top plate. So after we get done with that, you can go ahead and take the accelerator pump arm off. Which you just take this flat tip screw out here. And then you want to lift this up, and it's got this little S-curve bracket in here. You slide it right out of the accelerator pump. What I like to do, I lay all my pieces out on my bench here, and I kind of keep them in order. Once we get inside, you'll see that there's certain pieces that have to go in certain spots, but they look really similar to other pieces in the carburetor. So if you take everything, and I'll move this forward a little bit so I got more space back here on my bench, and as I take stuff off, I'll kind of lay it out in the same configuration that it goes into the carburetor. So here on the front, you have your idle mixture screws, air and fuel. Go ahead and pull them out. Inspect them. You want to look at them, make sure that they're not all beat up on the end. They should have a nice point on them. So we'll lay those out here. And that's pretty much it for the stuff on the outside of the carburetor for now. You want to make sure you pull your air cleaner button off. And then there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 8 bolts that hold this top plate on, but I forgot something. So your metering rods are down in here. On an Edelbrock, that's how you make big adjustments on your carburetors with the metering rods. These 2 screws in the front are nothing but the idle mixture. So your metering rods and your jets are down in here. I'll show you better when we get it apart. But you take these little covers off the top. If I can get them to come off. This carburetor sat for a long time. I got it from a guy. I don't know anything about it. So we'll find out as we go what it looks like inside. I dropped one of those screws down in there. I might be able to get it out, but if not, we'll be able to get it out when we get it apart. No, I got it out. It's right there. Okay, so since we can't get these covers off, There we go. These metering rods are spring loaded. They're supposed to pop up like that. So because it's been sitting and stuff, it's all sticky and old in there. So that's part of why we're going in here getting after this, so we can get it cleaned up so it works like it's supposed to. Now we'll go ahead and pull these 8 bolts that hold the top plate on. You shouldn't really have to keep track of which one's which, because they're all the same length, so it doesn't matter which hole they go in. Okay, we got all those out. Before we take the top plate off, I want to go ahead and pull out these metering rods. Once again, we'll lay them out which side they came from. This one's in there pretty good. It's not wanting to come out, which isn't a huge deal. Like I said, we can get them out when we take the top off, but I like to try to get them out first if I can. There we go. You see all that buildup on there? That's what's making it stick, and that's not good. If that metering rod's not moving, your carburetor's not working. So we got those off. Let's go ahead and lift straight up on this plate. This is your accelerator pump. That one's definitely seen better days. Luckily the kit comes with a new one. We'll set that aside. Then for now we're going to take our base and set it aside. And you flip your top plate over, and we're going to take our floats off. And to do that, you literally just take your finger, push on that pin that holds the float, pull that pin out, the float comes off. Do the same thing on the other side. Get that one out of the way. And then these are your needle and seats. For anybody that doesn't know, that's a needle. Sits in here. These are stuck pretty good. When they're stuck, they don't allow fuel into your carburetor. And unless you know something I don't know, that seems to be a problem, because you don't get fuel in your carburetor, you don't go very far very fast. And I forgot to bring a screwdriver over to get those seats out, so I'm going to pause you guys real quick and I'll be right back. Alright, I'm back. So this is your top plate. I'll give you guys a closer look. Here's where those pins were that held the floats in, one on each side. And then I pulled those needles out of these. These are called the seats. These seats screw down in there. This is your fuel inlet here. It allows the fuel to come in, and there's a crossover. We can take this gasket off here. We don't need that right now. And there's a crossover inside here. You can't see it. It's built into the base. But fuel comes in the inlet, hits this needle and seat, which allows fuel to go in here, and then it comes across in here, hits this needle and seat, and allows fuel to come in here. So there's actually 2 bowls in the carburetor, one on each side. So next thing we're going to do is pull these seats out. You want to be really careful doing this because they're made out of brass. So I believe they make a tool for pulling them. I don't have it. It's got a little deal that fits down in the middle of it and then has ears on it, so that really grabs on there good. So this is your seat. It's got a tapered hole down there in the bottom. It's got a screen on it, so it catches any dirt coming into the carburetor before it gets in the needle and seat. And then there's a tapered end down in the seat, and then there's the tapered end on the needle, and that sits in there. And when your float goes up, or when your float goes down, it lifts this seat up, sitting on there upside down. So when the float goes down, it lets this seat come down and allows fuel to come into the bowl. And then when the bowl gets full and the seat or the float raises back up, it closes off that needle and seat so it doesn't bring any more fuel in until it needs it. So that's how that works. We'll pull this other one out real quick. Not quite sure what that has in it, but it's not supposed to be there and it's not good for it. But pull these little screens off, we'll reuse those. Exact same thing as what I just showed you. So now, until we start cleaning stuff, we're pretty much done with this. So we can just go ahead and set it off to the side. And then we'll bring the base over. And this is your accelerator pump. And it fits down in here and it's spring loaded so it pushes out against that bracket. When you hit the throttle, it opens your throttle blades on the bottom as well as pushing down on this accelerator pump. When you push down on the accelerator pump, it fires fuel out these squirters, which squirts it down in as your flaps open and the fuel goes into the cylinder to burn, or through the intake into the cylinder, yada yada. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this accelerator pump spring out, and then this part's pretty particular. You want to make sure you pay attention, because if you don't get it all the way apart, you're going to end up finding a piece that you don't know where it goes, or you're going to end up losing a piece, and you don't want that. So these are your nozzles, your squirt nozzles, that when you hit the accelerator pump, it pumps fuel down into the throat. It's just a little squirter nozzle. But underneath that squirt nozzle, down in this center hole, there's a check ball and a spacer. Some rebuild kits come with these parts, some don't. That's where that goes if you get lost and can't figure out where the check ball is supposed to go. And you have to have that. So the check ball is going to go in first, the spacer goes on top of it, and then the squirter sits on top of that. So that's really important. Now, I've been doing these Edelbrock carburetors for a long time. I don't know what the proper names of all the pieces are. I just know what I've always called them. So if you know carburetors and you're checking this out and I called something wrong, I apologize. So you want to pay attention to these. These are your normal feelers. Like when you hit the accelerator and the accelerator pump squirts fuel, that's adding extra fuel. But if you're just on the throttle cruising, your fuel's spraying out of here down into the throat of the carburetor. And this is an air bleed. You want to pay attention to these because this side and this side could be interchangeable. I mean, you can bolt them in the wrong side, but they're not interchangeable because the vents are on opposite sides. You go and try to put the cover back on, you're going to do some damage to something that you don't want to do. So once again, right side of the carburetor, left side of the carburetor, keeping everything separate. Now, In actuality, like these floats, this float that I have on the right side of the carburetor is off the left side of the carburetor. But because I flip it upside down when I do it, it switches them. But because you have to have it upside down to do it, I put it on the side that it comes off of so I don't get confused. That one that I just pulled out and the one that I'm pulling out now are for the primaries. And then these back here are your vacuum secondaries. I'll pull those out in a minute. These gaskets on here, they'll come new in the kit, but they're also specific to the side. They've got, I'll show you when we go to put it back together, but they got a little groove in them. And if you look down in here, there's a little groove in that big hole in the center. You have to make sure you got the right gasket so that's open. As if you block that off, it's not going to work properly. I'll go ahead and pull these. I don't even know what these are called. You know what they're called? If you know what they're called, put it in the comments. That way if I do this again, I won't look so stupid. So that's your fuel delivery for your secondary. Same thing with these. They've got an opening just like the other ones that I showed you. And you want to make sure it's got the right gasket. So I always leave the gaskets on them or next to them so I can compare the new gaskets when I go to put them in. I don't know what the heck is in this thing or where it was sitting or what, but it smells foul. It doesn't smell like old gas. I can't even think of what it smells like. It's just disgusting. And that's why we're going through it. I never just get a carburetor from somebody and put it on expecting it to work, because 9 out of 10 times they don't. And then you're pulling it off anyways to rebuild it. So you go down to the parts store, get a rebuild kit for about $40, $45. Put it in it, essentially have a brand new carburetor as long as you're I just totally forgot what I was talking about. Your flaps down here aren't bad. This piece here sits in like this. Now, when you're putting it back together, it's possible to put it in wrong. I've done it before. So you want to make sure you pay attention. It's sitting in there like that. So once again, that goes like that. I pull it out, set it to the side like that. So all I gotta do is pick it up, set it back in there. So your flaps down here, they do come out. They've got screws in them. Unless you absolutely have to and you know something's wrong in there, don't ever take these off. I never take them out. If I find out there's play in the shaft or something like that, or they start leaking, I go get a different carburetor. You take these out, take these screws out, put those flaps back on. In my experience, it doesn't matter what you do putting those flaps back on, there's a very likely chance that these screws are going to come loose and fall down in your motor, and that flap's going to come off. Even if only one out of the 2 screws falls out, you don't want that screw getting down in your motor. So I'm sure people do it. I do not. If that's worn out, in my opinion, this base plate's worn out, I get a different carburetor. These seem good. They have some back and forth play, which is normal, but they don't have any up and down play. I can't get any up and down play, which means the bushings in here are still good. They still open and close good. So I just leave that alone. I'll clean it real good when I clean everything. This is your electric choke. Not all carburetors are going to have it. I'm not going to take this off or take it apart because the kit only comes with the gasket for this plastic. It doesn't come with any other pieces for it. So I don't see any point in opening that up to change that gasket. Now, if I put this carburetor on something, hook it up, and that choke ends up not working, then we'll have to get a rebuild kit for the choke, and we'll go ahead and do it, or just buy a new choke. But I have never had one that didn't work. I've never taken them apart. I've never had one that didn't work. So I just leave that alone. So down in here, I don't know how good you guys can see, but there's a jet down in here. That's where your metering rod goes. There's another one on this side, and then there's also a jet back here in each fuel bowl. And that's your crossover that I was talking about for the fuel. Keeps the bowls level. So next thing we gotta do is clean this the best we can. And all I do to clean it is just get some carb cleaner. Everybody's got their preference, what kind they want to use, whatever. This is what the parts store that I went to this morning had. So this is the kind I'm using. I'll take this over a drain pan, and I'm gonna obviously just clean the fuel bowls out real good, rinse everything down real good. But I'm gonna go through every passage on this carburetor that's not a bolt hole. All these passages here, all these passages here, through the jets, through the vacuum ports, through the air bleed adjusters. Everywhere there's a passage, I'm going to shoot carburetor cleaner through it. Through the air bleeds up here, everywhere. Every orifice in this carburetor, I'm going to stick the hose. I always use the hose. Stick the hose down in there, and I'm going to squirt it. And it's going to come out somewhere else. I'm going to squirt it down in here, it's going to come out here. I'm going to squirt it down in here, it's going to come out over here. You want to make sure you get a clean, steady flow of carburetor cleaner coming out of everything. And then once I get this cleaned up, I'm going to set it to the side. And then I'm going to grab these, and I'm going to go through the air bleed, and I'm going to go through the fuel pickup, and I'm going to go through the squirter. Every place that's not a screw hole that has an orifice that has a hole, I'm going to squirt it out and do the same thing. I'm going to grab my squirter, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to grab the top plate of the carburetor, blow all this out. I don't know if you can see it or not, but down in here where the fuel is supposed to come in is packed with something. I don't know what's in there, but I can see it. So I'm going to squirt all that out. I'm going to clean it all real good. You're going to go through 2 or 3 cans of carburetor cleaner, cleaning all this out, making it right. So I'm not going to set the camera up and have you guys watch me shoot carburetor cleaner at this carburetor for 20-30 minutes. I'm just going to go ahead and get all the parts cleaned up, then I'll bring you guys back and we'll slap this old girl back together. 3 hours later. No, I'm just kidding. Probably took about 30 minutes. Little disclaimer before we go any further. This isn't going on a show truck. It's not going to be. I'm not worried about opening the hood and people going, oh, your carb's dirty. It's going on Project Longhorn. As soon as I get a chance to go over to Texas and pick her up. And so she's still a little dirty. I mean, it's not shined up showpiece, but it's not what I'm going for. I want a functional carburetor. That's going to be my daily driver. I tow my trailer with, whatever else. So that being said, I thoroughly cleaned every part with carburetor cleaner. I wiped it all down with rags the best that I could. And then I took an air nozzle and blew it all off. Make sure I got all the carburetor cleaner pushed through it. Make sure I got all the moisture out of it. I was real particular on the actual functioning pieces of the carburetor on the inside, making sure I got all the passages really clean, so on and so forth. Also, when you're cleaning a carburetor with carburetor cleaner, wear safety glasses. I wasn't, and it shot back, hit me in the eyes, and I can't hardly see anything right now, but we're still going to get through this. So everything's cleaned up, ready to go back together. We're going to open up our carb kit here. And easiest way for me is just kind of dump it out. And then we've got our new spring for our accelerator pump. I can sit down in there. This is our new accelerator pump. Now, when you get these carburetor kits, this is actually an Edelbrock carburetor kit made by Edelbrock. And this is an actual Edelbrock carburetor made by Edelbrock. You want to double check and make sure that everything's right before you try to put it together. This kit comes with like an upgraded shaft on your accelerator pump. It's made out of brass instead of plastic. I've ran into before, this shaft's a little bit thicker than this plastic one, and it won't fit through the top of the carburetor. So you want to check and make sure that slides real easy. This spring is stiffer than this spring to solve the problem of this. This one won't do that. You want to check and make sure that the piece that goes into the spring is the same size and that your accelerator pump seal is the same. I've already checked this. I didn't want to get into making this video and just have to give up because I didn't have the right parts. So everything here checks out. So I got my needle and seat. I'll lay that with the needle and seat. Same with this one. And then you get this little bag that has all your gaskets and everything in it. Now inside this little bag, sorry if I'm sniffling, my eyes are burning, my nose is running like crazy. So we'll dump this little bag out. And there's your check ball. And there's your spacer. This is the very first thing that I do, for one, so I don't forget, and two, so I don't lose them. Like I almost just did because I dropped that check ball, but I got lucky. So right here in the center, in the front, where your squirter goes, the big hole in the middle, it's where your check ball goes. And then your spacer just drops in on top of it. Like I said, you want to make sure you know where that goes, and you want to make sure that you get it in there. So now, in case I end up tipping this carburetor over or something, I'm going to go through. I found my gasket for my squirter. Put that on. And I'm going to go ahead and install the squirter. That way, that stuff can't fall back out. I guess if you keep track of how you take it apart, put it back together in the same order, that might help to keep you on track with what you're doing. I've done enough of them, I kind of know where all the parts go, so I just put them back together in whatever order I grab parts in to put it back together. As far as I know, there's not really any torque specs on any of this stuff. I never really crank on it, but I make sure everything's good and tight. You don't want none of this stuff coming loose inside your carburetor. So next thing we're going to do, I got my gasket for my primary on this side. So I'm going to take, these gaskets are a little bit different. If you see, this one's got the hole in the middle with a little dash on each side, and then it's got holes. This one has a hole with a relief and a little hole. So you can't just match these up and put the one in the spot. You're gonna want to look in there, and you'll see this has the big hole with the relief there. So this gasket will go on this side. And then you find the other one that has the relief going the opposite way. And you put that one in there. Now I'm going to grab these. Set that one in there. Set that one in there. And then I'll go ahead and bolt these down. Again, I'm not torquing it or anything. I'm going to run both screws down gently till they stop. Make sure it's putting even pressure on it, like so. Then I'm going to give them about a quarter to a half a turn. You can kind of feel when it starts to feel like, I probably shouldn't turn that any further. That's when you want to stop. This is an aluminum base and you can strip those threads out, which you don't want to do. I'm sure it's fixable. I've never had to fix one. I don't want to try to fix one. So you just run them down snug and then kind of give them a quarter to a half a turn until they just get to that point where it feels like it's going to be too much, and then you stop. Now, back to this piece. This has to go in before these. I'm repeating myself on that because somebody I know, I'm not going to mention any names, but it was me, has put these back in without putting that in more times than I want to remember. And then you have to take it all back apart and do it again. Make sure you got the right gasket. These are a little tight going in. We're going to bolt these down the same way. Exact same process as the front ones. Okay, and we got our idle adjustment screws, fuel and air. We're going to run those back in. We're going to tighten them all the way down. We're going to seat them all the way in. You don't want to crank on them to make them tight because you can screw up the points on them. You want to just screw them in until they stop. And that's all the way closed. Now, those are closed all the way. We're going to leave them like that for now. And then I'll tell you why I did that in a little bit. These are a pain in the butt, the fuel pump, or the accelerator pump. They won't stay in there until you put the hat on, the cover on. So I'm going to leave it sitting to the side. I'm going to take this, set it to the side. We're done with that for right now. Take this, set it up. And then we want to take our needle and seat that came out of the carburetor. We're going to open up our bag here and dump it out. Now, the seats, generally speaking, are the same. Now, this is the needle that came out of our carburetor. You can see it's got a little lip there, it's got a body, and it's got a little space, and then the rubber point. It's the same thing we need to put back in it, which is this one right here. I line it up next to it. It's exactly the same. Now, in this kit, there's also this short one that has this little deal that goes in it, and this little spring that goes in it. Spring actually goes in first, and then this goes in there. so it's spring loaded. This is for a different setup. That's not for this carburetor. So you want to make sure and get the right one when you get started on it. So we got our little washer that goes on our seat here. Take it and put it on. Get it started. A lot of times, for some reason, these new ones are hard to screw in. They just don't go in the threads real easy. So you want to make sure that you're careful and have a screwdriver that fits good, or the proper tool to do it. And you just want to go slow and steady and make sure you screw it all the way down. Then I got to pull it back out because I forgot something. We got our screens that we took off of the old needle and seat, or the old seats I should say. There's just push in the end. Allows plenty of fuel to come in, but it's small enough orifices that it doesn't allow anything else to come in. So the kits generally do not come with that. So I clean out the old ones and reuse them. Now that we're doing everything right, you carefully screw this seat down into the top plate of the carburetor. And like I said, a lot of times they're hard to get in there. And if you just go till it stops, and you actually look, it's not in there all the way. You want to make sure it crushes that little, not necessarily crushes, but pushes down on that little sealing washer that comes with it. And then you know you're all the way in. We're going to grab the other one, do the same thing. And by the same thing, I mean start putting it in, forget you didn't put the screen on, and then pull it back out, grab the screen and put it in again. You got big hands that don't work very well. This is kind of an awkward process, but we make it work anyways. Same thing here. Careful putting it in. Make sure you stay in your grooves on your seat. You don't want to tear it up. If you mar it up too bad, it could keep the needle from freely moving up and down, which you don't want, because then you starve your carburetor for fuel, starves your motor for fuel, and then your fun day turns into a not so fun day. Okay, so we got the seats in. We want to grab our new needles. You just drop those down in there. Then we're going to grab our floats. Line them up with the holes. Put your dowel pin back in. Those dowel pins can't come in and out because of the way they sit in the base. That's why they're just loose in there. Same thing on this side. Gonna just slide it in there. Alright, so I got in a hurry, jumped ahead of myself. So now we're going to pull the floats back off. Because you have to put the gasket on before you put the floats on, or it doesn't fit. Comes with 2 gaskets. Looks like they're both exactly the same. I just line it up, make sure it's right. And we'll set the gasket in there, and then put the floats in. So don't be me. Put the gasket in, then put the floats in. Alright. Needle and seats are in, floats are in. So now we're going to grab our base. We're going to grab our accelerator pump. We'll set that in there. Flip this over. Make sure we get everything sitting in the hole it needs to go in. Put your accelerator pump through the top plate. And then before you let go of it, start 2 screws and run them down, because that accelerator pump spring loaded, and if you don't put 2 screws in to hold the top on, it'll pop back off and the accelerator pump will come back out, and you're just going to get irritated because you're going to have to do it again. Ask me how I know. Top plate screws are the same way. I run them down until they touch. Get all 8 of them back in there. I'll go ahead and speed this up so you don't have to sit there and watch me put every screw in. You just put the 8 screws back in the top, same way you took them out. Alright, now, before you tighten this down, you want to pick your carburetor up and make sure all your flaps move all the way. Make sure your accelerator pump goes up and down. Make sure your choke plate moves. Everything's moving the way it should. It means you got it all together right, essentially. I'm going to go ahead and put 1/4 to 1/2 a turn on all these. First 2 you put in, you might have to put a little bit more on them, but you kind of get a feeling for it. Alright, now that's the hardest part. You're going to go back, grab your choke lever, put it back on. I always save the little clips that I take off of these just in case, but most kits come with new ones. So once again, you got big hands that don't work very good, like mine. It's kind of a pain in the butt sometimes. Sometimes you fight it, sometimes it falls together. So that linkage goes back on there. And then we're going to grab this. And this is where you sometimes run into another problem. Forgot about this because I haven't done one in a while. But remember I was saying to make sure this shaft was the right size so it's sealed in here. You also want to check and make sure that this hole where this goes in is the same. Because for some reason, the hole that they drill in these brass ones is too small for this. And then you can't put your accelerator linkage back on. So I'm going to go ahead, I got a drill bit set aside just for this. I'm going to go ahead and get that drill bit. Because it's brass, you don't even have to put it on a drill. You can take a drill bit and just thread it through there by hand and just open that hole up a little bit so that'll fit. So I'm going to go grab that drill bit. I'll go ahead and do that real quick and then we'll get back to it. Okay, I got that drilled out. I had to stop for a little bit. I had another set of visitors. That must be an important person today. I don't normally have anybody stop by. So when you do this, you want to take this little S bracket here and make sure that you get a drill bit that's just big enough for this to slide in. Because you don't want to drill a big hole in there and have this just moving all over the place, because then you're going to have slop in your accelerator and you don't want that. You want it to be nice and snug. So now that I had to do all that, I gotta look at this, and it looks like it went this way. You're gonna put your little S bracket in there. You're gonna put that back through there, and then you just point this all the way down is the easiest way. And that'll let you get your screw back in there. And once you get your screw back in there, you grab your arm and for some reason those always come out when you're doing the carburetor and they're really hard to get back in. So then push your accelerator pump down. You want it to bottom out and put this in the hole that it just freely slides into. This carburetor is worn enough, I can see the wear on the bracket where it was, so I know it went in the center one, but you still want to make sure that it's all the way down when your throttle's up. And then work your throttle, make sure your accelerator pump's freely moving up and down. Then we'll get another clip. Put that on that one. And then we'll get back to our metering rods. It's always the last thing I do. No particular reason, once again, just how I do it. I clean these really good. I want to make sure they're nice and clean. I mean, they're going to be stained. You can see it's stained, but it's nice and clean at the end. I want to make sure there's no buildup or gunk. They're not smashed, anything like that, because these fit down in those metering jets at the bottom. So you take your spring, drop it down in the bigger part, then you're going to stick your metering rod down in there, and it has to go in that jet. So you got to kind of wiggle it around and play with it till it'll push down. Now once it'll push down, you want to move it up and down and make sure it moves and it's free and it's springing like it's supposed to, like it didn't originally when we were trying to take them out. If these are clean and working properly, when you take this little cover off, that thing should darn near shoot itself out of there. I mean, it's not going to shoot out, but it's going to spring up quite a ways. Put your little cover plate back on, hold it down with your finger, run the screw back in. Same thing on the other side. I'm going to drop my spring in. Set my metering rod down in there. This is the one that wouldn't move before. You can see it now. Moving real nice and free. That's what you want. If you go to put that in there and you push down on it gently and it doesn't just go down, it means your metering rod is not in the jet, and it's not good. If you try to force it down in there when it won't slide in easy, you're going to mar up the end of that metering rod, and that's going to mess up your carburetor. And at that point, you're going to just have to buy new jets and new metering rods, which if you're going to go through all that hassle, you might as well have just bought a new carburetor. It's pointless to rebuild it. So you want to make sure you're really careful doing all this stuff. You want to make sure these plates are tight. They don't have a seal or anything in them, they just sit in there, but you want to make sure they're tight. Holding that down where it's supposed to be so that that stays in there. Put my air cleaner stud back in. Like I said, this is going on Longhorn, which is still in Texas. So I'm going to go ahead and put my little carb bucket cover, whatever, back on it, keep dirt and everything else out of it. And then the very last step before you bolt this on your motor and try to fire it up is going to be your idle mixture screws right here in the front. Now, Edelbrock recommends for basic tuning that you screw these screws out 1.5 turns. That's what I've always done. I've always set them at 1.5. and I've never had any problems with them. I mean, if you might run across a situation where you gotta adjust on them a little bit. I've never really had to. I've put them out 1.5 turns. They usually idle good, and I just leave them there. So we're gonna go 1/2 turn, 1 turn, 1/2 turn on that one. I always put it so the slots where you can use a screwdriver to turn them are lined up a specific way. It makes it easier for me to know that I'm doing exactly 1.5 turns. So when you go and you seat them all the way down, if it's off of being straight up and down or side to side just a little bit, I just kind of turn it back to where it's straight and it's close enough. So we're going to go 1/2 turn, 1 turn, 1/2 turn. Now this carburetor should be set, bolted on my motor, hook fuel up to it. It should be ready to run. So hopefully that helped you guys out a little bit. And don't be afraid to do it. It's not that bad. And nobody ever showed me how to do it. I needed a carburetor fixed one time, and I didn't have money to buy another one, and I didn't have money to pay anybody to do it. So I bought a kit, I took it apart, and I figured it out. And when it comes to quadrajets, I've rebuilt them. I don't like it. There are too many things that can go wrong with them. So I can take them apart and clean them up, make them run better if it's old, sitting in a field or something, and I do that. But when it comes to complete rebuilds on them, I don't even mess with them. I'll go get an Edelbrock, throw it on there. I like these carburetors. They're pretty versatile. Everybody has their own opinion. This is my opinion. I like Edelbrocks. They work good for what I do, so that's what I run. All right. My eyes look a little funny. It's because I sprayed them with carburetor cleaner by accident. Should have been wearing safety glasses, but I didn't. So that's it. That's how I rebuild Edelbrock carburetors. Hopefully it helps somebody out. If I help one person, makes it all worth it to me. I enjoy making these videos. If you're not already subscribed, please do so. I'm trying to get to 1,000 by the end of the year. If you think I did something wrong or you do something different or anything like that, put it down in the comments. Let me read about it. I read every comment. I respond to every comment. I'd like to know what you thought, what you do different, what you thought I did wrong, what you thought I did right. Let me know. Like the video. Thanks for watching. Y'all have a good one, and we'll see you next time.